I was very pleased. Thank you all for coming out on a now cool and chilly morning after the last 3. I was trying to figure out last night whether it would be better if it was still 90 or overcast, because at least we have air conditioning in the library, but it's not really necessary this morning. But maybe the intensity of our discussions will warm up the room and we can crank the AC up for you. Thank you all for coming out. Just a couple things I want to tell you that Princeton Future's been up to this year. In addition to planning this project where we're going to look at the future of the town and try to project out over the next 20 years, in the same way Princeton University is undergoing planning for their future over the next 20 to 30 years, we feel it's important that the community do something similar, and hopefully we can find a relationship between these two plans that allows the community to grow with health and sustainability and vigor through 2050, at which point we'll turn this over to the generation behind us. Princeton Future is also working on a project a block from here in Nassau Street on the alley between Starbuck and Landau. And we'd like you to take a stroll through. It's called Design at Dome Alley. And it's a video, audio installation, art installation that we've been planning for the last year. And we're 2/3 of the way through installation of the project, with much happening in the next month. It's going to be an outdoor, public, no charge, free for everybody, space along the sidewalk of Nassau for you to pass through and be engaged by art and music and sound. We're going to have themed installations as well as rotating programming. Our first installation going in June will be themed around the Romantic poets. So keep your eyes open. There's some brochures at the back of the room about the project. They're specifically brochures for people who would like to help us with fundraising and would like to sponsor the project. We've raised 60% of the money we need to complete the project. We're still in fundraising mode, so we would like a little help to get across the finish line. I think Sheldon's bringing in some more chairs for the people in the back. We have the room set up in 4 tables themed around areas of the community. Table 1 is in the far back corner where Kip is sitting. Table 2 where Mike is sitting, right? Table 3 is here in front of me where David is. And over here where Yaina is, I believe, is table 4. So looking ahead for 20 to 30 years, Princeton Future foresees more technological changes in how we live. While protecting our traditional residential neighborhoods and commercial districts, we have identified 25 sites where the Princeton zoning code should provide for increased density, mixed use, open space, economical construction, public transit, decreased parking requirements, public, private, off-street shared parking, and more variety and choice of housing, affordable to low, moderate, middle-income families and individuals. Today you're going to hear from Dr. Alan Kornhauser from Princeton University, longtime Princeton resident and strong advocate for progressive transit strategies in our community. He's going to talk to us about what's coming in the future of transportation. Then we're going to hear from my colleague David Cohen, an architect in town, a long-running practice. We're going to hear from Alvin McGowan, who's chair of Princeton's Affordable Housing Commission. And then we're going to hear from Jim Constantine, a planner who's been based and working in Princeton for many, many years. I just want to offer a couple thoughts about the larger context of Princeton in the regional tri-state area. In the second half of the 20th century, our suburbs grew quickly as residents abandoned cities. In the last 20 years, that pattern has been upended. People and jobs are moving into New York City, Jersey City, White Plains, Stamford, and other urban communities. Construction in these cities has surged, driven both by demand and by municipal policies. While the poverty rates are still higher in cities, they are growing much faster in the suburbs. The suburban slide threatens the region's prosperity as a whole. New York and the region's other cities depend on the suburbs for a large share of their workforce, and the metropolitan area's special appeal depends in part on having a diverse mix of urban and suburban communities. Without more suburban housing priced for different income levels, cities will bear a heavy burden of meeting the region's affordable housing needs. Job growth has been much weaker in the suburbs than in New York City. From 2002 to 2013, job growth in New York City increased by 13%. Job growth here in northern New Jersey decreased by 2%. The share of residents in the region who want to move into an urban community in 1995 was 13%. 3 years ago, it increased to 26%. This is entirely driven by young adults. Young adults by nearly half, 46%, young adults are ages 18 to 30, want to move into an urban area. Think about it. These are the kids who grew up in the back seat of mom and dad's SUV being driven around in suburbia, strapped in the seat belts, watching everything out the window as mom and dad drove them from soccer to school to kids' parties. It's not a lifestyle they all wish to embrace. Indeed, they want to move into walkable communities. For example, from 2000 to 2010, 225,000 20 to 24-year-olds moved into New York City. 100,000 moved into Brooklyn. 100,000 moved into Queens. 100,000 moved into Jersey City and Hoboken. 2,589 moved into Mercer County. Housing permits in this region, from 1980 to 2003, suburbs outpaced the cities by more than a ratio of 2 to 1. That has now reversed itself. Now, permits in cities and urban areas are leading housing growth in suburbia. 37% of residents in New York City are optimistic about the future of their city. 22% of residents in northern New Jersey, central and northern, 22% are optimistic about the future of their community. Some trends are emerging now as you see really a reversal of people moving out of suburbia and exurbia back into urban centers. Town centers, city centers, and our community is part of this trend. Low and moderate income residents are being replaced by wealthier populations in walkable neighborhoods with good access to jobs. From 2000 to 2015, households making more than $100,000 a year have grown by 160,000 in these accessible neighborhoods, while households making less than $100,000 have declined by 61,000 households in the same neighborhoods. Households making under $25,000 in particular are seeing a market shift, growing by almost 50,000 households in the less accessible neighborhoods, while declining by over 10,000 households in the more accessible neighborhoods. Despite this shift, most low and moderate income residents still live in walkable, job-accessible neighborhoods. Over 95% of the neighborhoods with high proportions of vulnerable residents are also in accessible areas. Out of the 2.1 million households in these neighborhoods at risk, almost half of them, 990,000, are renters who earn less than $50,000 per year and are not living in public housing, are not living in other income contingent housing. This is in the private market. While some of these renters have other weaker forms of rent protections, many have little recourse against being pushed out if housing costs rise. These residents are mostly people of color. Neighborhoods that are both home to significant vulnerable populations and are walkable, job-accessible neighborhoods are 69% Black and Hispanic, compared with 26% Black and Hispanic in the rest of the region. Many of these walkable, accessible neighborhoods are seeing a shift to more expensive housing. Prices are going up. 46% of these neighborhoods have seen a recent shift towards an expensive housing market, while with significant increases in the proportions of homes renting for more than $2,000 or being valued at more than $500,000. The average home sale price in Princeton last year was around $680,000. To put down a 20–25% deposit and carry that mortgage, the couple, the family needs to earn at least $150,000. If you're in the $700,000 to $800,000 price range, you need to earn maybe $170,000. If you're north of $900,000, you might need to earn $200,000 to live in that home. So those are just some background statistics I want us to keep in mind in the context of what's happening around us in our region. And I'm sure you're aware these trends are happening in our own community here in Princeton. With that, I'd like to introduce Dr. Kornhauser to continue the conversation.
Presentation going here. Hi. It's a pleasure for me to be here. I think I moved into Princeton fall of 1967, so it's almost 50. Been here the whole time, or essentially part of the whole time. And I'm here to basically just talk about mobility and how to get around and how we might get around in the future. I just held on Wednesday and Thursday of this week what I call the Princeton. Is it on there?
It's on.
It's on. Lean in. I need to lean in. Is there we go. I need to lean into that sucker. The Princeton Smart Driving Cars Summit, the first annual. And basically I brought in from Europe and across the country the best people to deal with what I call smart driving cars, which is the application of artificial intelligence technology into mobility, so that in some distant future we can all be like chauffeured around as if we're in Downton Abbey or something, you know, and just, you know, provide an enormous amount of mobility. Whoops. I can speak loud, but maybe not that loud. Anyway, the other thing that I do is I publish a ever so often email newsletter that I spam out to I don't know, about 10,000 people around the world about where I comment on the on various activities associated with the application of technology to mobility.
Alan, we really need to do something because it's very hard to hear back here.
Okay, yeah.
Turn up the volume.
Turn it on. That's what turned off the screen. It's turning up the volume.
I mean, you know, we're going to have technology moving us around, but we can't do both sound and video. Whatever. Does it work now?
No.
Help's
coming.
All right. Yeah. Audio, microphone, audio. Testing. Oh, okay, we got. Hey, I don't know. When the IT guy shows up, everything magically works. It happens all over the place. You know that's just the way things go. And so I happen to be just laser focused on this new form, evolving form of mobility for lots of reasons. Why? Because we basically kill a plane's worth of people on every day in the United States on our roadways. There's just an enormous amount of carnage out there. Most of it has to do because we just don't pay attention. If we pay attention, we're pretty good drivers. If we don't, it's chaos. And since everybody's now on their cell phones when they're driving, it's pretty ugly out there, and it's getting worse. And about the only way to fix it is to say, hey, you're going to be like at McCafferty's down there, and you're a child in one of those carts. And there happens to be a little steering wheel. You've seen them, and we're just going to give you a steering wheel. We're going to make you think that you're driving so that you're happy. But otherwise, you know, the systems will know what the heck to do to keep you from crashing around. And I think that's where it's all evolving. But it's going to take, it is going to take some amount of time for us to go through this transition. And it may end up being as much time as it took us to go from the buggy whip to the steering wheel. It's going to take us to go from the steering wheel to just being chauffeured around as if we're riding in elevators horizontally. Have any of you ever ridden in an elevator? How many? Let me see hands of those of you in elevators. Oh, thank you. So basically, you know the mobility mode that we're all trying to create horizontally. It would be just like taking an elevator. Most of the time you would be by yourself, because most of the time when we take elevators there's nobody else. But every once in a while, geez, there are other people, and you might even have to share an elevator. Oh my goodness, you might have to share riding around in a car. And but it's actually through this ride sharing, it's kind of the secret of all this, because the ride sharing takes place when there's a lot of congestion. And guess what the ride sharing does? It reduces the number of vehicles. So out there on Route 1 at 5 o'clock, instead of, if there were 3 people in the car, you would have a third of the vehicles out there. There would be no congestion. There would be no congestion on Nassau Street because of ride sharing. Plus, if you get the average vehicle occupancy from what it is now, which is 1, at Princeton, in a typical morning, the average vehicle occupancy is less than 1. It's amazing. Because if you define mobility as really wanting to make a trip for a purpose, not just joyriding, divided by the number of vehicles you need to do that, well, then you see that my goodness, a child has to go from home to school. That's 1 trip. But the trip from home to school has 2 people in it. You know, I'm driving my child to school. I'm a computer. I'm not a person. So the vehicle occupancy for that trip is 1. When I'm going back home after dropping her off, that's a computer in there. That's 0. So you have 2 vehicle movements for 1 trip. The average vehicle occupancy is 0.5 for that one. And so usually when you see 2 people in the car, one person's chauffeuring somebody else. Oh, well, there are 2 people. No, you know, it's 1 person. So that's why it's that ugly out there. It is just not pretty. So, but if you could take that occupancy and take it from what it is now, average of 1 to an average of 2, you know what you do? you basically get rid of all congestion, as I suggested, because to get to 2 on the peak hours, you have to be at 3 or 4. So congestion is gone. At 2, you chop energy in half. You chop pollution in half. You chop greenhouse gases in half. So if you're really an environmentalist and you want to do something with respect to mobility, to get mobility is ride sharing, not vehicle sharing, ride sharing. And the way you get ride sharing is basically you have a driverless vehicle and some system out there operating it, just like a, you know, when you get into that elevator, you sort of, in some places you actually go to your cell phone, but otherwise you push a button and the door automatically opens and you walk in and that door automatically closes and it starts accelerating. Wow, you didn't even do anything. And then, you know, and then it decides to decelerate and stop and the door opens and you get out and you forget about it. I mean, that's what we should be providing horizontally. And if you do that, then it's not just the 1%ers that have enough money to buy it, okay? Because if you share, in fact, you can make it probably 20 cents a mile. Make it really affordable. You know, so then it's sort of available to everybody. It's available to those under 16 years old. It's available to, you know, some of us that are getting way up there. It's available to those that might not be able to see real well and so on. It's just available to everybody. So in a sense, that utopia, it seems to be out there, and it looks like, when you look at how well Moore's Law is working for us on the compute side and to be able to do this, that in fact we're going to be able to make it affordable and be able to compute it and just be able to do it and deliver it. But to do this transition from steering wheel to Downton Abbey, it might end up taking as much time as it took to go from the buggy whip to the steering wheel. So if we sort of look historically at what that is, or what that was, January 29th, 1886 is a monumental day. Why? Because that's the patent by Daimler of the first automobile. I mean, you could take another starting point, but that's that one. Okay, in about 1904 or so is Henry Ford. So if we take back in 2005, when I was bothering Jan and a bunch of you others trying to get a driverless truck tested in Princeton so that we could go out to the DARPA Grand Challenge and compete, which the DARPA Grand Challenge was really a monumental point here, because that's really the time at which we sort of believe, hey, maybe these vehicles could go out there and just use the ordinary streets and share the road. We have these shares out there on the road for pedestrians and bicycles to share the road. Really important. Why? Because we've spent all this money on this infrastructure, and it'd be nice that something other than conventional cars could use them. And really in 2005 with the DARPA Grand Challenge, it was the first time that we thought, hey, maybe really we can put sensors on these vehicles and computers on these vehicles that they could go out there and share the road and just use the infrastructure that we have. And that's what motivated Google to go out there and set up a garage and say, hey, we'll just put effort in just getting one car to work. And we don't have to go to New Jersey Department of Transportation and say, build for us an exclusive roadway to use automation. I mean, you go down there and they'll say, well, we're the customer, who's gonna use that? Well, one car. Oh, yeah, right, good luck. I mean, they throw you out of there. And then you run the GM and say, hey, we're gonna get New Jersey Department of Transportation to build a roadway for automated cars, and GM will say, really? Well, until they do that, we're not going to build one. Otherwise, who will we sell it to? Who's going to buy it? Where are they going to use it? Oh my goodness, until we get that. That's not that. So that chicken and egg was not going to happen ever. It's just not going to happen. However, if you can just take like 20 million bucks a year in a group to develop a vehicle and sneak it out there in Mountain View, and in fact show that it works. And in your balance sheet, 20 million bucks is not even a rounding error. So that's how we've gotten to this point. So the onesie, twosies, all of a sudden being tested in Arizona and in Mountain View. In some sense, maybe why not even Princeton? Now, what I was going to present at one point when I thought I had like 3 hours here, which I know I didn't, was a presentation. You can see the date. I think the date is on there. It's I presented it in 2010 about things for Princeton, and I won't go back. I'll just I'll just go to the last slide. One of the things I had to do is before we resurfaced Mercer Street, and the suggestion was we better put some speed bumps on there. Okay, we resurfaced now Mercer Street. We have street bumps. There's now a little sign there that tells you how fast you're going. I happen to run down there essentially every morning, and that thing shows 40 miles an hour. Okay? All right? What's supposed to be a 25-mile-an-hour street. And if you go over the Great Road down the hill heading out of Princeton, you know, it's more than 40 miles an hour. And in some sense, maybe what those little, radar things should do is they should take pictures of everybody's license plate. And we should publish in the police blotter every week in Town Topics, the top violators of the speed limit in Princeton, because it is really, it's just bad. I mean, we're, at least in the borough, let's bring back the borough. The township can do whatever the hell they want. Let's bring back the borough, the 1 square mile. I mean, do people really have to drive more than 25 miles an hour here? I mean, seriously, okay? But I don't know what we're going to do about that piece of it. The other piece of that had to do with bringing the Dinky station to Palmer Square, and the sort of end of that was converting the kiosk from the sign that has Princeton to Princeton train station with New Jersey Transit on it. That was called the full Kornhauser. Andy Kuntz is here someplace. We did the half Kornhauser at one point. Yeah, I just don't want to comment on what's been built on, because my comments will not be very nice. I don't appreciate it, but whatever. There is still an opportunity to do that, why? Because the Dinky, when it crosses the canal, it's at some elevation. When it even gets to wherever it goes to now, it goes up like 100 feet. And the elevation change up to here at Palmer Square is another 50 feet. I mean, you could actually start putting that thing in a trench and create a basement station up here at Palmer Square. Do you have any idea how that would make this into a really urban community here and so on? It would provide, because if you did that, you would pass underneath Faculty Road. You could then automate it. University's going to build some huge campus out there in West Windsor. You could actually put another station on there. You could provide 24/7 service. And in fact, connect the university and town and the other campus with cross-platform service of trains to Philadelphia, New York, and with the service out of Newark Airport, to the rest of the world. What an opportunity. What did we do? I don't even want to comment on how bad what we did is, but I think it's horrible. The other piece of this presentation had the other opportunity, which is Washington Road. Washington Road does the same thing as the Dinky. It goes that way low when it crosses over Lake Carnegie, and then goes uphill, and then crests right there at Woodrow Wilson School, and then comes back downhill to Nassau Street. You know, and why through this gorgeous campus that we have over here, we have this cancer running through it, and I will call it a cancer. I mean, why? Now, some people have said we're just going to close it. You know, we're going to do to it what we did to whatever it was, the street that's just out here that goes by Dillon Gym, Elm Road, and we're just going to close it. But what would we have to do? We would then have to put a bypass on Springdale or something. And how would the folks that live along Springdale like that thing? Or Harrison Street? Oh my goodness! I mean, they'd fill this room, and that would I would hope that would never happen. But in fact, you know, you could trench that and cover it and put it underneath where it is at Woodrow Wilson. And then you might have even located the Lewis Arts Center on top of it, in the center of the university, as opposed to out in left field, or whatever it is, the next great thing that the university wants to build, instead of having this road through it. But of course, you didn't see that in the university plans for the coming time. And then I think I want to go to the last slide. I'm going to move through these things. It's tough to go through all these guys. One more minute. Then there's this one. This is just what we've created here in Princeton in terms of, I guess, affordable housing. You know, we have up here Greg's Farm, we have Princeton Community Village, and we, you know, and I don't know, Elm Court, we probably have a few others. I sat on the planning board for a number of years, and we took these, you know, affordable communities, and we stuck them as far away from where there was anything as we could find. That was just wrong. I mean, if you're out here at Princeton, at one point we were talking about a development up here, you know, I said, hey, why don't we allow for maybe a 7-Eleven or a Wawa there, so somebody might be able to walk to go get a quart of milk instead of having to drive, and I was hooted down. I mean, my goodness, have services near where people live? I mean, where does that concept come from? And so we stuck Princeton Community Village way out here. And where's the shopping center? It's here. Where are the schools? It's here. Where's Palmer Square? It's here. If you live here, not only don't you have a lot of money. I guess that's what affordable housing is for people that don't have a lot of money. But to live there, you've got to own a car. You've got to own a car. You know, New Jersey Transit has the 606 show up once every 3 weeks. I mean, the mobility that's there is essentially Kelvin zero, not centigrade zero, not Fahrenheit zero, Kelvin zero. It is absolutely, it is terrible what we've done. To just provide this housing someplace without providing any support out there and saying if you want anything, you got to have a car. You can't walk to it. Oh yes, we'll bicycle. Okay, thank you. Okay, sure. Now that's not good. So what I really think that we should be doing now is providing mobility out there to these places, and it's not the freebie, okay? You know, what's the freebie do? It seems to me it goes around in circles with basically nobody in it, except the driver. Has average vehicle occupancy, I don't know what it is, I bet it's 1.5. including where, you know, the driver is counted as one. You know, there are coming on the market driverless mobility systems that could share Bun Drive and could share some of our local streets that most of the time have essentially nobody on them, and provide basically on-demand, door-to-door mobility to these folks. And we should think about delivering that to them. And we should think about delivering that to them using our tax dollars to do it. Because in some sense, we've been saving a lot of tax dollars over all these years because we stuck them out there. And it's time for us to ante up. Instead of providing private schools to some of our residents. So I said it, Yaina. You know? Really. These people, these folks that we put out there, either we locate them or locate services or locate things that go along with living, which includes not just living, you've got to, you know, get a quart of milk someplace. And if you're not going to let it so that they can do it by walking, because the properties that were right next to the shopping center, all of a sudden somebody built McMansions on them before we had a chance to put low-income housing on there. Well, those people have cars. They'll have cars. Why'd they have to live next to the shopping center? That we have to provide that mobility. So I think I've taken too much time. Thank you. One other thing that I did promise Kevin that I would say is with respect to zoning, okay, and the zone. It is coming that in fact this provision of mobility to folks, and these are the first folks that we provide it to, but the deal would be that if you would let this down your street, down next to, in your backyard, that you also get to use it. So that you don't necessarily need 3 cars, or 2 cars, or even 1 car. So that therefore our zoning doesn't need to say, hey, you got to provide 1.5 parking spaces. Oh, we're going to provide mobility in other ways. And instead of providing the parking spaces, maybe we'll ask you to take whatever you would have put in and whatever it would have cost you to put in the parking spaces. Why don't you put that into a fund to help pay for the mobility that would otherwise be delivered? Thank you.
So just to put that last comment in context, we require in Princeton for you to build on your property, if you want to build a residence of any type, you must provide 1.5 spaces of parking on your site. Not on your neighbors, not out in the street, not in the garage, on your site. So in many large acre properties in the surrounding area of the core of the community, that's easy. Your driveway is 3 spaces, no problem done. But if you're in town and you seek to redevelop an existing built site and you want to add a unit or 2 or 3, all of a sudden you have to add 1.5 or 3 or 9 parking spaces. So one of the things we lament is the congestion of traffic in town. Curiously, we require that you put spaces on your lot in town to assist in that congestion. All right, now I'm going to turn the conversation over to architect David Cohen. David, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Kevin. I just want to start out real quickly by mentioning the first ad that appeared in Town Topics mentioned that I was a member of the planning board, but I am not speaking this evening as a member of the planning board, and like some of our nominees for Supreme Court Justice, I won't be making any comments about any projects that might come before the planning board, so I hope it's not too frustrating for you. So the topic of my couple of minutes is, as in the ad, was what if? And in case you were thinking that I, as an architect, am besotted with futurism and, you know, this is an image from early 20th century Italian futurism, a famous architect's imagination of what the future could hold. No, that's not what I'm going to talk about. Oops. I'm actually going to talk about smart growth in Princeton, and my subheading is, what if we actually already know how to do this right, growth, rather than looking at all these sites that you all are going to be discussing later on this morning. I'm going to look at some sites that I think are pretty successful. We don't do everything right in Princeton, and we certainly can use some planning, but I think we know how to do it right. All right, so what are the principles of smart growth? I didn't make this up, by the way. I got this off a website called Smart Growth USA. First thing is mixed land uses, and Alan was already just talking about this, so it's a great segue to my presentation. You really don't want to have just residential development. When you're growing, you don't want to have just commercial. You want to have the two integrated so that the residents of the town can actually take advantage of the services that are available in the town. And when we first moved to Princeton, everybody was bemoaning the fate of Forrestal Village. You know, this development that is supposed to look like a town center. And everybody was taking the lesson, because it was not thriving at the time. This is not the way to do, you know, people love shopping malls. They don't want to be out in the weather when they're shopping. And I was telling everybody, you're taking the wrong lesson from Forrestal Village. The problem is there's no residential there. There's nothing to support the commercial. So take advantage of compact design. Just makes sense. It's more economical. It's a better use of resources. Create a range of housing opportunities and choices. So again, like Alan and like Kevin was talking about, we need to make sure that we have different price points of housing. We need to have different kinds of housing that are suitable for different populations that we want to have in our town. If we want diversity, we need diversity of housing types. Create walkable neighborhoods. I think it speaks for itself. Foster distinctive, attractive communities with a strong sense of place. All right, so one point is to appeal to the architects in the room. But mostly this is about planning, it's not about architecture. But there's a tangible benefit to having places that are pleasant to be in. Preserve open space, farmland, natural beauty, and critical environmental areas. I'm not talking about Trantor here for fans of Isaac Asimov, and we're not talking about a planet that's been paved over. People need open space. Even Manhattan has Central Park. Direct development toward existing communities. It's, again, a more efficient use of resources. We've already got infrastructure here. We want to take advantage of that. We don't want sprawl. The average carbon footprint of a city dweller is about half of that of somebody who lives out in the suburbs. So if we're concerned about the future of the environment, this is critical. Provide a variety of transportation choices. So we've already talked about pedestrian, but we need facilities for bicycles. You know, walking isn't fast enough to get everywhere you need to go. We need facilities, we need mass transportation. Not everybody is able to bicycle or walk where they need to go. And of course, we're going to continue, this is America after all, we're going to continue to have individual vehicles, although I love the ride-sharing concept behind the individual vehicles. Make development decisions predictable, fair, and cost-effective. So this is going to be one of my follow-up slides. It's going to be a little bit controversial. I won't say more about it right now. And encourage community and stakeholder collaboration in development decisions. I think that's something else that Princeton does pretty well already. I mean, how many meetings have I been to in the last 2 years for the bicycle master plan, the parking study that's going on right now, the investigation of rezoning to preserve community character? We really are trying to reach out to the community and ask for their input. And by the way, that's how you avoid development like we saw in my opening slide, the futuristic monstrosity, although it was pretty. Okay, so mixed land uses. I think it's pretty cool that Princeton was doing this 80 years ago. Palmer Square is a mixed-use development. You know, when I first moved to Princeton, I didn't realize how new it was. I sort of thought, boy, this is so integrated. It must be, you know, pre the modern era. But it was built in the 30s, and it has residential and commercial, and used to have Civic in the same place, the post office. Too bad it had to move. Take advantage of compact design. I hope people in this room know what this slide is of. It's Firestone Court. I think if I could live anywhere in town, this is where I would live. It is this adorable little hidden townhome development over by near Olden Lane. Create a range of housing opportunities and choices. Everybody loves Jefferson and Moore. Everybody brings their kids to go trick-or-treating there. Both single-family and duplex housing, totally integrated. They work fine side by side. And I think one of the things we need to think about as a community is allowing duplex construction in more neighborhoods than they're currently allowed, because it provides a little bit more affordable or mid-range housing, and there's no downside. Townhome construction, again, in the former borough, you find a lot of these, not in the township, but there's no reason why there shouldn't be in certain parts of the township these kinds of developments. One of the nice new projects, you may not recognize it from the back, but this is the apartment building that was built over where D'Angelo's is, that grocery store on Spring Street, and has this beautiful little pocket park in behind. Again, on the left, that's mixed use, obviously. And then the luxury condos on the Hullfish parking garage. And people may feel like this is not a great example. I know there's a history behind the property and what was done to the minority community to acquire this property, but, and I know that they're not selling either, but that's a question of pricing, and that's a problem that's going to solve itself. I mean, this is actually a pretty wonderful little development, especially if you go up and walk inside it, and you know, the price is going to come down. The loser will be the developer. But I think the town does all right. Creating walkable neighborhoods. Again, back to Jefferson and Moore. Great to have sidewalks and crosswalks and shade trees. When you're in the center of town, you need wider sidewalks. But, so we're already doing it right. And one of my favorite spots in town, the little walkway, my kids used to call it the secret walkway that goes by Alchemist and Barrister. What's great about this is that it's really human scale. So the first two examples, we have to share the pedestrian facilities with cars. It's really wonderful sometimes to be able to have something that's just for human beings. And similarly, on top of the Hullfish parking garage, some nice human scale walkability. Foster distinctive, attractive communities with a strong sense of place. This is new, and I mean, relatively new. I don't know a single person in town who doesn't recognize that Heinz Plaza is a fantastically successful public space. It's got mixed use, residential, commercial, civic with the library. We do know how to do it right. We just have to have the courage of our convictions and do it. Preserve open space for recreational and wildlife habitat, natural settings. We've got Community Park South and Mountain Lakes and many other examples in town. Direct development towards existing communities. I could have chosen any number of pictures for this, but this is a little townhome development that's nestled back off of Witherspoon Street against the cemetery, and really successful, I think. A variety of transportation choices. I know the freebie is only one, but I was riding my bike past and thought, great, something for my PowerPoint. Okay, make development decisions predictable, fair, and cost-effective. I think we can probably agree that for Avalon, they felt like this process was not predictable, fair, and cost-effective. I've heard them say that they're never going to try to build in Princeton again. And yes, I knew that some of you would cheer when you heard that. But the point that I'm trying to make here is that, and I realize that the process, the lengthy process that they went through, resulted in a better project, and it probably could have been even better if we had better planning that had created a set of expectations for the developer ahead of time that they could have worked to meet. But on the website, on the Smart Growth website, they talk about how if you make it easier to develop outside of town rather than in the center of town, you're going to get dumb growth, not smart growth. So we really have to wrestle with the question of how to support this increased density and the growth in town, because it's important for so many reasons. Encourage community and stakeholder collaboration in development decisions. This is a fake photo in the sense that it's not actually a development meeting. It's a meeting of the PCDO, but that's what I had available. Why grow at all? I like Princeton as it is. Change is inevitable. If we don't plan for change, we get change we don't want. It's better to think about the future we aspire to for our community and put in place policies that will help bring that future into being. Smart growth policies can help ensure sustainability. As I mentioned before, half the carbon footprint for people in dense urban communities than out of cities. Prosperity. When we grow, we are stimulating our economy, bringing more customers in for our merchants, providing work for contractors. I mean, it is a benefit as long as it's done right. Diversity. So if we don't, as I mentioned before, if we don't have diverse housing stock, we can't have a socioeconomically diverse community. And we've been seeing those pressures happening where we've been losing our lower or middle income housing. And I think that the market is the solution to that, to provide mid-cost housing by providing a greater supply of housing. Equity, fairness. The principles behind smart growth provide public amenities that are available to everybody, and therefore everybody benefits, not just the 1%. And livability, I mean, it should go without saying, but if you have smart growth, you have a community that you would actually want to live in. The big reason that I am in favor of embracing smart growth is, I was looking at this book, Everything I Needed to Know I Learned in Kindergarten. People are probably familiar with that. And the first principle is share everything. Okay? I think we need to share Princeton. Princeton is a great place to live. And if we wall ourselves off and say, no more, after me, I'm here, but I don't want any more people coming into Princeton, we're not living by that central guide of sharing. And we need that to make our society work. So that's my presentation.
Thank you, David. Thank you very much. So this issue of walkability, as our speakers are pointing out, we already have this going in our community. I see Sam Bunting in the room. Sam, do you know Princeton's walkability score? In the community?
The borough is very, very walkable, and other parts are not so walkable.
Well, it's rated on the website at the RPA as 74%. Which puts it in the top tier of walkable communities in the entire region. Ralph, do you recall, I'm sorry to put you on the spot, how many people in Princeton walk to work as maybe a percentage of the working?
Roughly 2,500 out of 13,500 who work.
15 to 20% of us already get up every day and walk to work. It was a pleasure this morning when I walked here to see Phyllis and Mike Suber walking down the street. I saw Kip walking down the street coming to this very meeting. So we really have a lot going on. How do we manage this, maintain this, and keep our community accessible to all? So as David was saying, it's not just a question of do we want to grow or not, but as we all age, where are the younger people coming into this community? Are we making ourselves available to them? Are those 20 to 30-year-olds that are moving in droves into Manhattan and Hudson County, are they going to come here? Why should they? Because that is the future of our community as we age out. Okay, Alvin McGowan now is going to speak to us about the issue of affordability in Princeton and what it means to have affordable housing. Alvin.
I think mine's going to be much shorter. I do not have a PowerPoint. I'd like to begin with some information from a recent book that was written about the John Witherspoon neighborhood. At the heart of childhood in the Witherspoon community was a feeling of comfort, safety, and belonging. Many of today's elders who were growing up during the 1900s to the 1950s recall experiencing the essence of the African proverb that it takes a village to raise a child. Person after person remembers how, when they were small and dinner bells rang at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, they ran home as fast as their small legs could carry them. It was a beautiful place to grow up, says Alice Satterfield, a small, slender woman born and raised in Princeton, who raised her own daughter Shirley here during World War II. Everybody was family. We all took care of each other. The feeling of that community was family was literally true for large numbers of residents surrounded by their relatives, brothers, sisters, cousins, grandparents, aunts, and uncles. We also had settled in Princeton. As Paul Robeson recalls, my early youth was spent hugged to the hearts and bosoms of my hardworking relatives. Mother died when I was 6, but just across the street were my cousins, the Carraways, with many children, Sam, Martha, Cecilia. And I remember the cornmeal, greens, yams, and peanuts and other goodies sent from bags from down North Carolina. Harriet Calloway explained the curfews the adults had established to get children off the streets by 9 o'clock. I was living with my Uncle John and Aunt Lizzie up on Humbert Street, and of course, we had little yards all fenced in. Well, if I was up a couple of doors from the neighbors and I heard the Nassau bell ring, I would fly home. Everybody started running to where they belong. So that was the time. It was the kind of community you know, as everyone knew everybody and you didn't lock the doors. One of the greatest concerns was protecting the children from danger. On Birch Avenue, everybody's mother was your mother, recalls Haiti Smith Black, the second African-American woman to be hired as a secretary by the Princeton University in the 1950s. So you didn't do anything wrong because somebody was always there watching for you. Now, I guess I wanted to read that section to bring home the fact that there are communities here. And particularly the community I'm reading about now is changing. This was, in a sense, a Princeton past. And these decisions you make about zoning, everything else is going to depend on what you really want Princeton to be. I am going to move on and, oh, I forgot. As the commercial says. The comments being made by the moderator are his own and do not reflect the views of the Princeton community or anything. So I have to make that comment too. These are just mine. Affordable housing in Princeton. I'm not sure I'm amazed actually when I talk to people, hear people. People do not know who really the three major primary deliverers of and managers of affordable housing are in Princeton. One being Princeton Community Housing. A lot of people know what Princeton Community Housing is, and they're rentals. They provide, rentals, and they tend to be low and moderate rentals. I'll explain low and moderate to you in a few minutes. The other is the Princeton Housing Authority. This is originally a HUD-based project. When we talk about low income, truly low income, Princeton Housing Authority is the primary provider and manager of low income housing in Princeton. And then there's the Princeton Affordable Housing, which I am on that board. It's a mixture of things. There is the COA requirements that the town has to comply with. That's managed by the Housing Authority, not yet. Princeton Affordable Housing. But there are also a number of units that people can buy. They're not all rentals here. That is also managed by Princeton Affordable Housing. To give you, again, an idea of what you're talking about, and you can purchase these units right now. They're available. You talk about low-income housing. Well, I'll start with moderate housing. Talk about moderate housing. If, for a family of two, there's a range of below of $37,000 up to about $60,000 in income, personal income, for a family of two. For a family of four, it's $46,000 up to $74,000. You can tell this is moderate, and the other thing that's important about this is we're not always talking about poor. This stretches right into the middle class. For low income housing, for a family of two of $22,000 to a high of $37,000. For moderate, it's $27,800 to up to $46,000. Now, when it comes to these units, there really are no prices, if you will, on the units. It all depends on what your income. It depends on two things: your income and your household size. So like a one-bedroom could be in this range, a two-bedroom, and or a three-bedroom, all depending on your household size. Again, my point for going through all this is to say there is a program, and Princeton does provide it, and there are units available now for purchase. That is actually one of the good things about Princeton. They take it seriously. Beyond that, Princeton also has other ways that affordable housing is provided. They provide for group homes. There are some partnerships with private developers, owners, also to provide affordable housing. So once we get past, where you decide what the zoning is and everything else, here's the actually nuts and bolts of what actually goes on and what's actually available, and hopefully it's going to stay available. Actually, it has to be. At some point, Princeton's going to get a number of affordable units that they're going to have to provide. I don't know what it is, so don't ask me. I have no idea what it is. But that's coming, and then the town's going to have to, even with the zoning, even with everything else, it's going to have to figure out how to provide that type of housing. It's also important because hopefully the other thing these income levels show is this is going to provide some of the diversity that the town wants. And again, when I read the first couple passages from this book, most of the people in this book, there was a community that was formed. Most of the people in this book could never, ever now afford to live in Princeton. And it's produced, obviously, you know, the most famous person that gets produced is Paul Robeson. It's been produced by this community. So,
let me tell you an interesting fact about group homes. Does everyone know what a group home is? A group home is a home that, for all intents and purposes, looks to the exterior like a single-family residence. It's a house on a lot, front yard, backyard, side yard, and a driveway. But people who live in that home are not connected by family relationship. They're actually connected by a shared disability, often a developmental disability. New Jersey has in place a program to deinstitutionalize developmentally disabled adults, moving them out of state institutions, truly miserable places, let me tell you, into single-family residence across New Jersey. Now, Princeton has been remarkable in not lining up and objecting to the group homes in great numbers, to the group homes that we built in the community. My company actually designed and built one on Harrison Street. It's a blue house directly across the street from the firehouse, right next door to the Merrill Lynch office building. It's built by it was funded by a private nonprofit. Princeton's affordable housing program bought the old home and donated it to the nonprofit. The nonprofit raised the money to rebuild the home. We didn't tear it down, we expanded it, enlarged it from 2 bedrooms to 4 bedrooms. You can tell because there's a handicap ramp on the front of the building. So other than that, it maintains all characteristics of a normal single-family residence. Here's the amazing benefit to the community of having these 4 adults living with us. Social engagement of these adults, they live right on a transit line. They actually have jobs. They actually go to work. They have full-time nursing care, not a registered nurse, but a home health aide, 3 shifts a day, 8 hours a shift. They need attention for personal care and maintenance, cooking, cleaning. But they're now living and participating in a community, living a vital life, unlike they were stuck in a state institution. Oh, and there are some benefits to the community in terms of our satisfying our affordable housing obligations. So when you build a group home and sponsor a group home in your community, you get 1 COA credit, not for the building, but 1 per bedroom. So a 4-bedroom group home gets you 4 COA credits. Oh, but wait, there's more. If your residents are low income, which unfortunately most developmentally disabled adults are low income residents, you get a 2nd credit for each resident. So that little blue house is generating 8 COA credits for Princeton. What I would maintain absolutely no negative impact to the neighborhood, indeed a positive beneficial impact to the residents. So that's my little aside on the wonderful community benefit to everybody for sponsoring group homes. Okay, now I'm going to turn the conversation over to Jim Constantine. Jim Constantine is a planner, Princeton resident, longtime participant in Princeton Future, really good friend of mine, and he's paid attention to the growth of our community with an eye and sensitivity, unlike many people, and he has a lot of interesting things to say. So, Jim, thank you.
Thanks. I think we're running a little behind, so I'm going to try to do what I can to move us along. So I was charged with speaking about what new ways we could use to begin to plan for our redevelopment. How can we do it? And of course, the first thing I want to say is I hate the redevelopment term is so charged, and so I'd like to first suggest that it's really, I think with all the sites that you're about to look at, it's about community evolution. So I'd like to suggest some other words: reinvest, repurpose, regeneration, reposition, reinvent. In fact, reinvent might even apply to the planning process in Princeton as you look at these sites. Right now, a lot of, and I was actually part of a New Jersey APA session yesterday where we're revisiting the municipal land use law, a number of our panels were on the fact that planning boards in New Jersey don't plan. Because all the planners of the state were saying this. We're in agreement on it. They do reactive review. And so what I'd like to suggest now are some tools that maybe shift that paradigm and throw out some ideas and some ways that you might think about for proactive planning. And I'm going to hit just a few, beginning with area in need of rehab, which is a tool, form-based codes, some rethinking about parking, and then kind of the new infrastructure, which was supposed to build on Alan Kornhauser's presentation, but I wish we could have seen more of it. So area in need of rehabilitation is actually a provision in the redevelopment statutes, and I'm trying not to be too technical about this, that basically allows you to take any part of a municipality or the entire municipality and place it in a classification that allows you to go in and do site-specific redevelopment plans. And those redevelopment plans effectively become the new site-specific zoning and public improvements for things that might happen. You could actually intercept use variances and all sorts of unforeseen development that might come in and handle it this way. There are a number of brave communities that are undertaking this. Actually, it's occurring a lot in South Jersey. It's being used in place of redevelopment planning, which brings up the baggage of there might be condemnation or large-scale pilots involved. This doesn't allow either of those tools. Locally, it's been used. Heightstown put it in place painlessly with no controversy over the entire municipality. And I started working last May in Highland Park, and we put that in place at the end of the year. Highland Park now has this tool in place over the entire municipality. They had a redevelopment plan along their stretch of Route 27, which in 11 years hasn't been able to yield one project. We already have 4 or 5 projects coming in under rehab because the word has gotten out that we now have a tool that's flexible, that works in places outside what was previously designation. The designation is a real easy lift. All you have to have is the majority of your water and sanitary lines more than 50 years old. There's also an age of housing provision. I don't advise using it because it brings up the scary notion that my house is over 50 years old. I'm part of the classification. Somebody might take it. Rehab gives you a whole bunch of additional powers that you don't get under conventional zoning. And this is really, these are the carrots and the opportunities there. Greater control over unanticipated infill development. So you may have something, for instance, at not one of the 25 sites you're looking at today, in the Route 206 corridor, where I will tell you, I can guarantee you that some of this older office commercial stuff that's either obsolete or heading toward obsolescence is going to pop up at some point. So it's a great tool. You can use it, again, on a site-specific basis. You don't have to over-plan in advance. You can bring it down when you need it, when the opportunity is occurring because of an owner or a developer appearing. You can prepare a detailed plan. Use, density, form, scale, site layout, streetscape design. You can design the whole thing in advance in a way that the community will find acceptable, and that will be a one-shot approval at the planning board. One night, one and done, because the planning board has had input in shaping the plan. You can exercise architectural controls in a way that you can't do under normal zoning. You can require improvements to be constructed exactly as they are in the plan because you have a redeveloper's agreement that is much more binding than a normal site plan approval. It's a tool that's available. You also, I just wanted to point out here, you can do this a little dark, it's hard to see. This is a stretch of Route 27 actually in Highland Park. One of the things they have in their redevelopment plan is the closure of driveways, no more than 1 per block along Route 27. They really understand that driveways are a dangerous interruption on their main street, similar to our main street. And then last, you can build in public participation. And that was an important thing that communities are using. South Orange has this tool in place. They've used it already 3 times. There was a whole election run on it that were going to blight the whole town. The forces that were for rehab won, and they're using it. They even used it for a down zoning. So it's a really, really cool, flexible tool. Lets you get tremendous community input on the front end, crafting what's actually going to happen on a site. And just quickly, what it won't do. Doesn't change existing zoning, doesn't approve or authorize any use. There's full control of the governing body through this process. They're the only ones that can deploy it, and they're the only ones that can adopt it. Does not eliminate the powers and protections of the planning and zoning boards, doesn't force any property owner to participate. In fact, it's voluntary. It's something that you would be doing with property owners only. Doesn't involve blight, condemnation, any tax abatements, and you're not going to go in and do it at the scale of a single-family home or in neighborhoods. Okay, tool 2, form-based codes. And on this one, I actually like to blend form-based code is kind of the cool, hip planning term of vogue right now, but you really think about these as really streetscape codes and really shaping the public realm, and that's actually how the avenues of Paris were built. It was all codified, not a lot in terms of detail on the architecture, but really in shaping the street space. And so I've had a chance 20 miles up Route 27 in Middlesex County in the borough of Metuchen to actually be putting in place. We've shaped a lot of new development by really focusing on the form of how buildings relate to the street. New ones on Route 27 that kind of pick up and use the scale of building forms that they have in their main street. They had a tough stretch of 27 because there was older single-story commercial and they had a downtown rail station. And so there was huge commuter parking lots that grew and grew and grew over time that are now all under redevelopment. We actually started with a number of projects at the edge of town. This one was actually built by a Princeton developer, Joel Schwartz. The pattern of the surrounding neighborhoods, which are single-family homes, mainly, some two-family, to the street, is picked up on new streets. So everything faces towards the street. The same thing happening over here. We use lots of new streets, street connections that continue to grow. There's a new apartment building there. This will cross the extension of the Middlesex Greenway. So and parking is kept small and hidden, and the parking ratios were reduced. I didn't sleep at night at first because I thought, my gosh, what happens if they come with more cars? Everybody's saying this is Middlesex County, 2 cars per household. We tinkered it down and down. And with the proximity to a walkable downtown and train station, not all the parking fills up. It was a rough streetscape as we were transforming. This is all under redevelopment today. This is what it looked like 20 years ago, and this is what it looks like now. So part of it was also focusing on trying to create good tree-lined streets, adding in parallel parking. There's 25,000 trips a day on this stretch of 27. So if you just did nothing more than focus on streetscape, and reinforcing the good public realm and a walkable realm, and this wonderful double-row alley of shade trees was designed by Princeton's Henry Arnold. And of course, it's coupled with a whole complete street strategy, which Princeton has, and I think Princeton's really a great leader in many ways in terms of complete streets and things we're doing. I will say Metuchen had a mayor that was very passionate about providing dignity to bus riders. Princeton's a little late to that game, but finally getting there now with some new shelters that I'm glad to have participated in. And then public space. So we have an old parking lot that's now being transformed to something like Heinz Plaza, except we've met the holy trinity of complete streets because we're actually doing shared space, where we extend the paving flush with just bollards at the edge right across the street. So imagine if Heinz Plaza didn't have a shrub and a band of sidewalk edging it, but just continued out so that you had the ability to close it for large events and really take advantage of that flexibility. And so the other thing that happened along the way is that there's a edge of the new first leg of the Middlesex Greenway comes out, which meant that all of these new 500 apartments that are coming online downtown needed bicycle parking. We have no ordinance for it. We just started asking and suggesting, and even took one prior approval and said, you don't want to be the only apartments without bicycle parking. We have bicycle parking in basements, in bike rooms, in bike lockers, sheltered outdoors, and in the new parking garage. It's coming in every single form. Every single resident has bike parking. All of the parking ratios are pushed down, and this gets us to affordability. The second largest household cost after your mortgage or rent is transportation. And one of the things that David knows, Debbie Kinsey knows, is I'm passionate about is that affordable housing advocates don't talk about the transportation costs. And so one of the things that we did along the way was actually figure out that stumbled into it to some degree, is that by reducing the parking ratios below what RSIS requires, residential site improvement standards, which Kevin and I think David alluded to, we were able to increase 42% the achievable densities. We didn't need more than 1 car per household. We finally demonstrated that folks that live in a transit downtown, I would guess that downtown Princeton is similar, even though it doesn't have the same rich, robust transit service. And so we now have a whole series of other parking policies that we put in place. We went through the parking revolution based on a study by the same consultant, Nelson Nygaard, that Princeton now has engaged. So I'm hoping that Princeton might go through a similar rethinking of parking. And one of the transformative strategies they identified, well, along the way, was that there was more parking than necessary required. Their recommendation was simple. Cut the minimums in half. Cut them in half. Put maximums on that were the former minimums. And then add a tool called payment in lieu of parking, which allows you to pay to provide parking off-site. And all of a sudden, we have people using all of these tools at play. It absolutely is a spur to help generate redevelopment of smaller sites where you can't provide enough required parking by law and fit a building on that really generates the right return and even is a good tax rateable and a smart use and highest and best use of the property. So we have the old infrastructure thinking. There's Glorious Alexander in Route 1. And this all plays well into the thinking about new infrastructure. And the demographic wave that Kevin mentioned that's coming, it's not just though the millennials, it's also the empty nesters that are increasingly looking for ways to live less without cars. Transformative Transportation Index, the cities where new technologies and tools can reduce your need to own a car. You know, for some folks of the older generation, it sounds like living in an Eastern Bloc country. And you can bike and take transit and all that sort of stuff. But it is absolutely the demographic wave. Kevin asked about walk score. Here is Palmer Square, 93. Great walk scores in Princeton generally, something to build upon. But I do think this huge wave that's bigger than the boomers, the children of the boomers, the millennials, those born between 79 and 2000, Princeton is probably going to struggle in capturing its fair share. And part of that is affordability. And part of it is the fact that you don't have that rich transit infrastructure that they're looking for. So I hate to be the bearer of honest, truthful news, but I don't think you're going to capture as many as I see happening in places like Highland Park. And they're willing to walk across the river a mile to the New Brunswick train station. So connections are important. And then last, a tale of two Princetons. Just leave you a thought about East Nassau Street. And I think this is really the challenge in Princeton. You have these wonderful spaces, outdoor gardens, and probably Jack's created the best little stretch of streetscape in Princeton. None of it by plan, but there's still the asphalt scars of the former gasoline alley. Wouldn't that be great as an outdoor beer garden up front? Oh, you can go to Brooklyn or Philadelphia and find lots of those. And every driveway, because we're addicted to parking, and you don't want to give up parking because it's required by law, so it's illegal to get rid of it, and you feel you need it because there's no greater plan for where to park your customers, so you wouldn't dare give it up, creates driveways, and driveways are dangerous points. Every driveway is a potential conflict with pedestrians, the car coming in or coming out, even if they're rarely used, and they represent the fact that we basically have a high addiction to this kind of driveway, auto-oriented parking anywhere. Quality of this is, that's Nassau Street, Princeton. Wheel stops. That's worse than some of the things that you might find in Edison or other sprawl communities. I had a whole list of them there, but I think I'll spare them. Edison's an easy target. We can't, you hear that we can't solve our parking problems down here. It's interesting that there is a dead-end parking lot here, another one here that goes out that doesn't connect to this one, which comes in and goes back out. Another one here that comes under. This one over here that's serving several properties, and the same thing on the other side of the street. But if we go 6.5 miles down the road, the rocket scientists in Lawrenceville have been able to use, to break the driveway and parking addiction, have been able to use a recovery treatment of closure, consolidation, and connectivity. There's one driveway here that hooks into connected parking lots. All of the driveways here are closed, and whether they're public or private or semi-private lots, shared, under different ownership, they all connect, they pull back-to-back streets. It's not impossible to do, but you need some planning to accomplish it. And that all plays into creating a more pedestrian, safer, transit-friendly, true complete street environment. And so I'll close by bringing up Princeton's complete streets policies, adopted to improve safety for pedestrians, bicyclists, children, older citizens, non-drivers, and the mobility challenged. Looking at this new, you have some improvement here. Maybe there's a pedestrian plaza. I have no idea whether it'll be nice or not, but it certainly was an incentive. A new driveway where one had been closed decades ago. Near this crosswalk and this crosswalk at one of the most intense pedestrian places in town. In a complete streets community. Which just raises the question of how could things like this happen? And I know I've talked to folks and well, there was nothing we could do. Highland Park wouldn't allow it. Other communities wouldn't allow it. We allowed it. So think about where the monument goes when the first pedestrian is hit. I hate to end on such a down note, so I'll bring us up with one little point. You know, also thinking about quality. You get these shots to deal with properties, and this is why that rehabilitation tool can be so effective. So we have new use and activation here, but the, I'll say this in the architectural improvement that occurred to this building 25 years ago, administratively approved, got no attention. Maybe we're happy that we got small signs. I gladly would have traded off some bigger signage to get 7-Eleven to do some architectural improvement. And that's the sort of thinking that you need to have in reinventing the planning process. And then last, in a complete streets community where we're dedicated to safety, we have these river rocks that can spill onto the sidewalk, where an 80-year-old can trip, an 8-year-old on their bicycle can hit it and end up in the curb. And it's, again, attention to detail. Most importantly, in a complete streets community, we should also be complete streams, because somewhere there is a fish looking for its rocks, so it can spawn in happiness in its stream. And maybe we should go to the Nassau Street Seafood and let them throw some bloody bones over here in ceremonial recognition that we've stolen those from some river somewhere. So with that, I'll turn it back to Kevin and let you all shoot off.
Okay, now's your turn. We want to turn conversations inward to your tables. Want you to have discussion. Each table has a list of sites. I'd like you to talk about those sites. You as residents, what are your hopes for the future? I beseech you, please, the old fights of the past, put them aside. Avalon Bay's done, the Dinkies moved, Palmer Square's built. However we feel about it, it's there. What are we going to do going forward? If you think mistakes have been made, how do we prevent ourselves from making them again? If you think successful accomplishments have been achieved, how do we advance them into the future? We're going to do this for 1 hour. You're welcome to stay at your table. There are more chairs here in the front for those who are standing in the back. If you want to speak about some different sites, you are welcome to get up and move. Okay?
Does each
yes.
table take one area?
I'm sorry. I should give you some, yes. So every table, you have the ad on the table that lists the sites for your table. And yes, ma'am. Every table is going to speak about...
Thanks. Yes, so every table will speak about the sites specific to that table. If you wish to offer comments about different sites, you're welcome to get up and move to another table. We're going to have note takers at each table. And then in the last 25 minutes, 1 hour from now, we're going to reconvene and summarize the comments that we heard so we can carry this conversation forward. Yes, ma'am, in the back. Yes. So, Professor Kelly, would you stand up and say which table you have? You have table 1. All right, hang on. Table 1, where Professor Kelly is sitting, is going to discuss the Old Valley Road School site, the municipal building site, Race Street housing, the former Packets, properties along Witherspoon, south side of Franklin. So effectively, Avalon Bay of Franklin at the southern end of Witherspoon up to Community Park, Swimming Pool, and Valley Road School, the northern end of Witherspoon Street. Area 2, I believe Jeff Gradone, are you at table 2? So that's the table in the back by the coffee. Area 2 is the Chamber Street Garage, the Record Exchange, the Park Place Municipal Parking Lot, Chestnut Street Firehouse, Telephone Company site, Westminster Choir College campus. Area 3, I believe, is David. David standing up. He's going to discuss effectively the eastern end of Nassau Street, Bank of America and parking lot, Harrison Street Firehouse, the shopping center, the Terhune Street Senior Housing, PCH expansion, and the Lanwin Herrontown development, so I guess that spans up to the ridge. And Area 4, where Catherine Kish is standing, that's going to take eastern side of town, Textile Research Institute property, Butler Tract, Broadmead and Gray Farms properties, Lower Alexander Street corridor, Karen Court, low income family housing, and the Springdale Golf Course. So I guess it's eastern and southern swath of town. Okay, any other questions? All right, folks, get a donut, or excuse me, a pastry and some coffee. And the board member that I just introduced from Princeton Future will be the monitor of the conversation at each table. And please be civilized to your neighbors. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm David Kinsey. Anybody else for table 3? I think everybody's just Alex. Introduce myself. I'm Betty.
Question answer them, I will. If not, other people here will do that. And distilling my picture,
Aha! I can't. They can't hear.
I'm Charlie Beach. I'm a member at Springdale Golf Club, and I'm the president of the Board of Governors when we signed a lease with the university in 2006.
I'm Len Perlick. I'm a resident of Springdale Road.
I'm Tom Davis.
Okay, may I suggest we first get to know each other, and then let's plunge in.
Hey, my name is Mark.
I'm George Stein.
and I just wanted to bring up European experience. We always
Casts and characters. And then
No. Yeah, well.
do anything. It's a big
Everybody asks
what I met here over there. And so
I would just try to say that idea of net zero is something that needs to be embedded in everything that comes out of this session. That vision of net zero needs to be a part of it. And it means that for everyone, you pay less for your utilities, so it's a benefit to any individual who lives in a place like that or runs a business like that. But we can't even begin to think about building, growing, urbanizing without addressing energy and how we're going to address climate change. It is a pressing problem for our town, for our planet. So I just wanted to put that out there. And I think also just want to say that as we address things like complete streets, the piece that is also missing from that is how we're dealing with stormwater in a more green way. So all of these sort of green strategies need to get embedded in this planning process.
Thank you. Kip Cherry, just to build a little bit on what Heidi put. Kip Cherry. Yes. So I would like to bring up the idea of historic preservation, which builds on sustainability, Valley Road School being a historic place, and reusing existing buildings, and not just throwing away the old and building new. I'd like to point out, just for information, that Avalon Bay is made of lightweight wood construction, which is extremely flammable, and we're working at the state level as well as the local level to try to come up with new restrictions on that kind of construction, because it just goes up like that. So I think that's enough for now.
Steve Pollard, 14 Chestnut Street, across from the firehouse. Mixed use. I've been a resident of Belton for about 50 years. My particular interest is in transportation, or lack thereof, especially trends in recent years that I think are going to be detrimental to the town. I'm Sheldon Sturgis.
But I'm not the best person to answer that. The question is about the new building and how, what it will look like, what we have to envision.
To Montgomery County, essentially Harrison Street corridor.
My name is Peter Morgan. Excuse me, David, are there more copies of that anywhere around the station?
Yes. Yeah. All right. We have this suggestion here. 8 minutes per table.
Can I just introduce the town? One comes out of an area of Munich, Germany, and the other comes out of Copenhagen, a suburb of Copenhagen. One is that in the German situation, there would be housing along the road, the way shown, and there would be parking type situation behind the houses, within the houses.
It was actually stored there, but it was foolishly stored there because at that time there was no way for disposal of the corrugated solvents. They stored them in glass. Of course, in New Jersey it freezes. We broke the glass and it drained down through the. It was about a litre of solvent. It was not dumped. It was stored, and that was the way New Jersey stored their samples in the 1950s. The land is not contaminated. The water draining through it towards the lake is contaminated, but it is collected, it is treated, and the water now, clean water by NJ water regulations, is now put into the lake.
The 50s. The bank also owns something ran just to the east. It's grassy and green. Used to have a war memorial on it. Yes.
I have a proposal. And in fact, this is only an example of a town-wide proposal. I went to the Princeton University proposal for their 10-year plan, 20-year plan, and they introduced the concept. It's beautiful. It's called intercept parking. It's used all over Europe, and the idea is that you protect the historical core of your beautiful city by encouraging people to park outside of that core. The Bank of America lot is a perfect place, possibly, you know, with the lot behind the Whole Earth Center, to put there a mixed-use, multi-story garage, stores, living units. But if you do that, you must provide shuttle transportation to Palmer Square.
Robert Wood, and I've lived in Princeton for 36 years, and I came to the table primarily because I was concerned about the comment about the telephone company nearby, but Sheldon told me before the meeting that I misinterpreted it, and I'm still concerned about Westminster Choir College future.
I'm Rich Delgado. Miranda Hempel is my wife. She is the owner of 16 Chestnut Street, which is currently a single-family house. We are very close to the firehouse. We are sort of diagonally across the street from the firehouse.
Well, I've lived in Princeton almost all my life. I've lived at 16 Chestnut Street for more than 25 years, and I am concerned about the incursion of commercial into the Tree Streets neighborhood, and frankly into any residential neighborhood. I've read in zoning documents that part of their purpose is to prevent bleed-off of commercial properties into residential streets adjacent to commercial streets. I'm also concerned about the increase of impervious coverage. And I'd like to know exactly what official force anything decided here or spoken about here has in the process.
So my thought is based on everything I've heard here, that there's not a priority, but let's not go in this list in order, given the fact that we've got an hour, but time does tend to go quickly. So maybe let's start with Westminster Choir College, and then we'll get on to some of the other, we'll get onto the firehouse, Chestnut Street, and then we'll try and make it through the list, but let's hit that first, just because it seems that the majority of the folks here want to talk about that. So, do you want to give us some background on the site, the property?
Well, I'm happy, Marianne, you can chime in. Sure. Yeah, so, as Marianne pointed out, and it seems like maybe the people at this table actually do know quite a lot about it. There are these two institutions living on that property now, Westminster Choir College and Westminster Conservatory. We at the Conservatory are a grandchild, basically, of Rider University. And for that reason, Rider, Westminster Choir College, Westminster Conservatory hierarchy, we've been a boardless organization that has been tuition-driven and unable to kind of plan for a long-term future, though we are a school the size of educating 2,000 people a year, which is...
I think that, we have to think of the whole site in the same way, not just do we want to auction it off, but what do we see in relation to the context of the neighborhood. And similarly, in relation to Nero fiddling while Rome is burning, these questions are, even small in relation to that affordability question. Yes. And one of the things that's been very interesting to look at this past week was the commission report on what should happen in terms of the remedying the 2010 revaluation. And there's a series of recommendations. Okay, you made these recommendations, but as we speak, there are more and more developers coming into our neighborhoods and changing it. So we can come up with a million ideas and recommendations, and you can have a commission, but let's put the rubber to the road and tell us now what's going to happen in terms of actions.
This is Anita's point, and I think this is a very important point. Yeah.
I want to speak after
and your name is?
Suzanne Lehrer. I'm
a piano teacher, and I teach. I'm a piano teacher. I teach independently and at Westminster Conservatory. So I'd like to follow up on that as something that David Cohen said is that we'd like to encourage community and stakeholder collaboration in development decisions. And something that I hope is that whatever happens with the college and in the campus, that the conservatory, which that we have about 2,000 students who study there, that's going to remain here. We need a building, and we could work together with other arts organizations, and wherever we are, collaborate and develop. And part of the development could be creating some kind of art center, art space that would house the conservatory, along with the Princeton Symphony, with other arts organizations may need a space. We could work together.
Not to take anyone's right to speak, but just to summarize, I think that Anita's question connects with your concerns, and it is one about the relationship between citizens and government bodies. What I find very frustrating is that, for example, I'm very excited and inspired to see you here and to hear these presentations, but then we see these disasters going on which have to do between the competition between profit maximization and community living. And if I may, if I may summarize what you have said just so far, it's that point that deserves attention. It's not the lack of ideas or the lack of worthy people, as we saw right now. It's that the very greedy interests of developers are winning over everything else. And I think you're right. What do we do about it? How do we...
Due to their mortgage programs and high incentives, impact all of us in terms of the marketplace of limited stock of housing in town, would be good that they are dealing with their our market issues with their supply of housing for their market, which is growing. Every time there's a faculty member hired and they don't have housing for them, they come to our neighborhoods. And their incentives push up the competitiveness of pricing, no matter what neighborhood you live in. And so it tends to push up the cost of housing in town. So they really do need to provide for people in this case who they are hiring with high salaries for long-term tenured tract positions in land that they have that is obviously not most convenient to the center.
Now, a question I would raise is that highly compensated faculty member going to be interested in Merwick's gym?
Not the way they've developed it.
No.
Today, that has been
So it would have
that's
to be,
not a high-end, it never was.
Right.
No, okay, that was entry level. But even the entry level people aren't necessarily that interested in it either. But, they come.
Yes, Alan.
Are we going to have multi-use in this? Are we going to have just more housing out here in left field in which nobody can walk to go get a quart of milk? Are we going to continue to do this one more time in Princeton? Where's the shopping center relative to this? Okay, so you're making a bunch of people who are going to have cars, or are going to have to take a car. Oh yes, there'll be Tiger Transit once, whatever. Yeah, sure. Okay, never mind.
That's
Not currently.
I don't.
So there's the case.
I can see where you want to keep the continuity on both sides of the street, like as you're coming in, like you were saying, the house, yes, on Harrison
and
Street.
then back to the single family.
Right. That makes sense to me because if you have one of the homes on the one side and then you look over and it's vastly different, I can understand that. But I agree 100%. Maybe something closer to the one that would be shopping or something.
Something to support the surrounding community. Maybe we don't want to create a shopping.
The spillage. He was the one that was going to develop it.
What happens with livability beyond watching TV and sleeping?
It's an interesting point. The Jackson Witherspoon neighborhood has a density of about 23 units per acre.
Right.
And we had the old Folgers pharmacy.
Right.
And it sat vacant for 3 years while we tried to rent it. And we kept trying to get grocery stores in there. And we went to McCafferty's, we went to Whole Foods, we went to Wawa, and in spite of that density, they didn't feel there was enough.
The building wasn't big enough either. Yeah. They want big parking and the
they
like.
want parking. That's right. And
but I think you have to look at new forms of
upscale grocery stores, and what we should be talking about. What do we have? What do we have on the blocks of Paris? Okay, we don't have upscale grocery stores. We have, and it's about time that maybe some of it.
You need the affordable housing to get the owners of. You need the affordable housing to get the owners of the grocery store to be able to afford living in a similar area, so that they could walk to work.
I think things are changing. I mean, as has been pointed out, us driving to grocery stores is on its last leg. It may be that Amazon is going to deliver everything to our houses. Okay? which I mean, I get dog food delivered to my house. Okay, I mean, cut it out. But some.
From the back of the municipal building on Valley Road. But that opens up the corner where the rescue squad is now for multi-storied building that could be predominantly affordable housing.
And that's our next site.
And
Site number 15 as we just go up Harrison Street.
In many cases, you're talking about older structures that are only 1 story tall, that just going to make them 2 stories or 3 stories would get you so much more opportunities for residential housing that includes affordable housing.
There's been a lot of conversation by city council to the effect that for every 1 rental unit of affordable housing, you have to have 5 units of free market rate housing. But that's not the case because, for example, when any nonprofit or municipality develops affordable housing, it can be totally affordable housing as long as the financing can work out. But we do not have to build massive numbers of new apartment developments in order to meet whatever allocation of fair share owes Princeton.
But I would say that
we can't hear you down here.
If you
We need a small little microphone.
The comment was in response to Betty about affordable housing. There's various ways of building. One is 100% affordable. A more conventional is private sector, where the private sector builds 4 units that are market rate and 1 is internally subsidized. That's what Montgomery Township is complaining that it will have to do. But there are other solutions as well that Princeton has even used in Griggs Farm, where it's a 50% set aside, a mix of for sale as well as rental housing.
As long as we're on with Colin Maid, who happens to be our neighbor, along the lines of having semi-detached or duplex homes in single-family zones, deals with middle-income housing, permits someone who has that structure to sell 1 unit and age in place. This would affect us in our particular zone. And I mean, we're in a neighborhood where the incentives are to tear down and build a house that sells between 1.2 and 1.4 million. You can run the numbers that were done, and we're not talking 175,000. We're talking a family income probably between 250 and 300,000. Whereas if you look at the sales on Jefferson Street of these semi-detached units, they go for anywhere from $675 to around $750.
He does the payroll, Rider University takes care of our contracts and our insurance, and we don't pay for the use of the building, but we turn back a significant amount of money to the institution. So we are, you know.
Because no one has said that Westminster Choir College, as a college of the university, isn't self-sustaining. I've not heard anything to that effect.
No, it could not be self-sustaining. It would, you know, they would have to have a much higher endowment.
But that's not the impetus for this.
No,
it's problems at this university.
No, I think that the Ryder sees that property as a tremendous cash cow.
It's a cash cow.
They have something that they need to sell, and they need to raise a lot of money, and that's it.
I mean,
that's it.
I also understood that I guess part of the problem is that the facilities are at a point
Precisely.
that need to be reinvested in. So this is a logical planning stage for a university to say, hey, we are at the cusp of having to invest a lot of money into something that may not return that. And
many of the facilities are new, though. I mean, the front part of the campus, a significant amount of money has been put into that. The Playhouse was just newly renovated, you know, a couple of years ago. The new Cullen Arts Center, Erdman Hall was completely renovated and you know, updated with codes and stuff. That was maybe 10 or more years ago. Williamson Hall is a very historical building, but it's, I mean, but many of those front buildings are in very good shape.
It's really the 19 are they 50s, 60s?
Cold War dormitories.
It's the dorms.
The dorms.
And because, you know, those are dorms, so they're full of bathrooms, they're full of, to me, I look at those and say that's the buildings that someone's going to come in with a wrecking ball. That's going to be the only way to go.
Yeah, that would be logical.
Right. And that would come down. But they're right across from the school. They're like right across from high school, right across from JW. So that's not a bad place if you have to take a wrecking ball to take it. You happen to have knocked down our building, which is not great. We need a new one. But it seems to me that there's an incredible parking lot there that is of use already, that's new, and the schools need parking. That's there. There's a field opposite there. You could close off those streets and make it pedestrian only in the center, which would be a dream come true. I think. And then you were saying
this notion that that developers need to be restricted because, you know, they're maximizing profit and nothing else is a little, needs to be looked at differently. Developers build what's allowed to be built. What do you want built is the question, not what do you not want built. So, you know, it's like playing whack-a-mole, right? We don't want that. Well, then you're going to get something else. But what is it that you want? So, I consider myself a responsible developer. I have coming from architecture and a background in sustainability. I try to build things with that. That doesn't mean I get to build 2 houses on one lot in the township because it's not allowed. Even though it's more sustainable, it would produce more affordable housing with smaller houses, whether they're duplex or separate. Can't do it, and you know, conversations with multiple land use lawyers, they're like, you have a snowball's chance of hell of ever building more density unless the zoning changes. If the zoning changes, builders and developers will build what they are allowed to build. But it comes back to, what do you want? Can you stop saying, you know, we hate that, that's not okay, that's less affordable, and instead say, what we would be happy to have, we're willing is 2 smaller houses. It's a duplex, you know, it's twice as affordable.
Developers to understand what they can build and what they cannot build, and also satisfy some of the questions that are being raised right now. I think that's very excellent.
Neighborhoods in this town were produced by developers. Developers are the people who build housing. It's not individual custom houses built by people. I mean, that happens, but it's a difficult, expensive process for people. To produce housing, it's developers who produce it.
Right. So, but it's I think you're quite right that it's a shared vision of what can be done and what should not be done, right? And or what could be done.
Should be done. What should not be done.
What should be done.
On the one hand, you're talking about the council and how the government has to do what the people think should be done. I would like to note that the sense that there was hostility with developers came largely from Mr. Grindell, who would not talk to the local people. But on the other hand, I would say also that in the discussions in the task force meetings, what was noted was that the meeting with the neighbors was far more amenable to discussion and negotiation than the meeting with the real estate and the developers and the builders and the architects.
It's great, you know, whatever. You know, they're going to tear that sucker down, okay? You know, that was within walking distance of town. It was within walking distance of offices and universities. So now what are these folks going to do? They're not going to live out in the 20, okay?
That area is really close to Butler Track, too. I mean, there's a lot of consideration between different kind of area. Lower Alexander Street corridor. Replace existing service and office uses with newer retail, office, and residential uses. Include small-scale, short-term apartment rentals for visiting actors, musicians, and other performers. I think those are the group homes that Kevin is. No. Kevin? No, that's not an answer. That's a question. Who wrote these?
Well, I think they were heavily edited by our administrator, Mr. Sturgis.
Aha. Okay.
Because we're definitely something pushing.
Yeah, exactly. Here, and I just think it would be a little more open, because what has been stated here is likely the plan anyway. Somebody's plan. It's not our plan, but it, you know.
That's a great point. Well, once again, does this reflect the university's thinking for this area, or does it reflect the town's thinking for this area?
Probably the town didn't have anything here. But I mean, it is time for us to say, but you know, so much has been dismantled in this area now that discussing it is almost
Yeah, this is like a comment from 10 years ago.
It is.
Really sort of,
yeah, sort of co-opting us into a speak, and that is the arts transit center speak of whatever it was their plan.
First of all, artists are not going to want to live short term in Princeton when they get on the train and come out of there in New York lost.
No.
And this is not going to happen. There's
No,
nothing,
why should they
there's
add
nothing
an
attractive here.
Or is that a free
They're going to go
free
right,
night
get in
stay?
the dinky and go right back. McCarter people time the curtain so they can hit the 1054 dinky to get the heck out of Dodge.
That's right.
So we shouldn't be building housing for that. But I do want to suggest that Lower Alexander's has the opportunity to carry significant housing growth of one manner or another, whether it's high density, whether it's affordable, whether it's expensive, whether it's condos, apartments, townhomes. There's a lot of opportunity on Lower Alexander being adjacent to the line, as Alan has suggested, ways that it could be augmented and improved in the future that would make the argument that David made about smart growth absolutely unimpeachable in that one specific location, because it could be along a high-powered transit line.
And do we feel
Would you
it's
add
a
more
mixed
stops?
use area?
Not
Do we feel it's a good mixed use area?
I think for the same reasons I think the table thought Butler should be, this is a clear candidate for mixed use.
Even better.
It's even better
It has
because
to be.
there's higher traffic load now on Alexander than on Harrison.
Used to have a gas station on the corner. Now it's being rebuilt to, I don't know what, maybe it's Enterprise rental car parking station or something, huh?
The university owns it now.
I know the
Yeah,
university
they own the whole
owns
thing.
it. I think they're renovating it. I heard they were renovating it for Enterprise rental car parking spot or something. I haven't.
Well, whatever it is, it's
No,
probably a short-term placeholder.
It's a
to
short-term
large
placement, but what all that housing that was built down there, guess what? Somebody wants to get a quarter mil, they got to take a car. Okay, and all that redevelopment that we already did down there, all the Lawrence apartments, all that stuff. There are no services for any of those folks. You say, live here, take care of yourself about mobility and getting anywhere. Oh, the Wawa. No, that's true.
Transit has facilitated their being.
I guess you can. I hate that Wawa. I put it out of my mind. I stand corrected.
Suggesting something for artists to stay short term, I think you're looking at a place that could use a bed and breakfast, an inn, or a hotel.
It used to be there years ago.
Yeah, the Nassau area.
There's nowhere lower on Lower Alexander.
I'm just throwing it up.
There's nowhere lower on Lower Alexander Street than where my neighbors and I live, on Basin Street.
Yes.
Leave aside that the map doesn't show Lawrence Drive, leave aside the fact that it also shows that it's a through street versus a dead end, leave aside that many other maps in this town show my driveway as a through street. The really crucial issue on Alexander is the traffic and the dangerousness of that curve.
That curve.
The DNR Canal Commission long ago said they were willing to have a new bridge across there. Alexander Street was, quote, once straightened out. I have seen cars spin out. I have seen collisions, and I have heard the wreck that killed a man on the bridge.
You need residential there, you need office there, not just retail, because, as I said, retail is a difficulty.
And it's also a transit hub.
Why can't the transit hub start functioning earlier in the morning so so some people can get to Princeton Junction early to go to Manhattan to work? Or also later in the evening. My husband looked into this when we first moved here because we're near the shopping center. But there was nothing early enough for him to get to work in Manhattan or late enough for him to come home from Manhattan and get to the home.
Okay, let's stay with our next two sites, and then we'll circle on back. So we have two more to go. And
Are you about the shopping
we're
center?
on the shopping center.
How historic is it?
I'm sorry?
How historic is it?
It's fairly historic.
Actually, I once was at the National Building Museum, an older kitchen building, and there was an exhibit by the contractors who built it, and there was the Princeton Shopping Center, early 50s, McCormick Construction Company, a huge national construction company.
Isn't it the first mall of its kind in the nation?
It's early, but it's...
It was different about originally, it was a different kind of retail shopping center than it is today. It had Bambergers instead of
Acme and
two food markets, the Acme and the
That store was still survives.
Okay, a brief moment of nostalgia, but then I'm going to keep on going here. Okay, so PCH, up the hill, up Glen Drive, is Princeton Community Village. Started being built in the 70s. And what should happen?
Just a thought experiment. Wouldn't it make more, after hearing Alan bemoan the fate of people who are stranded without cars up there, wouldn't PCH expansion be better on the Terhune Street senior housing site? Accessible to the transit hub, supermarkets, some retail for these folks, and bringing them closer, not pushing, keep adding to the people out in the woods.
The other way of thinking about it is that if you added housing to the community, Princeton community sites and the Crickstown sites, now it makes more sense to put a shelter in place to serve them because there are more people that you can serve. And I'm just
on Chestnut Street, which is mostly unacceptable. It is a tree. It's the tree street the way we feel about it, us that live on it. And you're talking about no parking, putting in residential. And we all have different concepts of what you're talking about. And one of the concepts we're talking about that comes to mind is that first picture they put up there of that gigantic high-rise that looked like spears and things going up into the air, which would be 60 or 70 or 80 or 90 apartments, because that piece of ground is big enough to put in 100 apartments, 200 apartments. If there's no...
There's a height limit, 35 feet.
People ask for variances all the time.
So when you say residential, this is a quiet street that does have a lot of traffic on it already. We've now done away with this garage entrance, which would increase traffic. But you're really talking about increasing the density. Off the top of my head, I would say you could feasibly almost double the density on Chestnut Street. Chestnut Street only runs a block, 2 blocks.
No, that's what we're trying to say. People's opinion. Residential, what would be okay?
Residential is too broad a statement.
Right, but it could be, let's say it's some form of residential, no parking. Could it be senior housing? Is that okay? Could it be just small apartments? Or could it, do you think 10 would, right, say 10 apartments? I don't know, 5 apartments, 20 apartments? Or would you rather have, 2 McMansions? Those are the, for example, in my neighborhood.
For 2 McMansions there.
Yeah. So in my neighborhood, we have a former Masonic lodge that could have been legally torn down and turned into 2 McMansions over in Witherspoon Jackson, right?
The zoning.
Zoning allowed. Tear the Masonic lodge down, build 2 McMansions, easy, no variances, nothing required. The developer came and said, instead of doing that, I'm going to keep the old building. It's 4 stories tall, and I'm going to make it into 10 very small apartments. I think it's okay. We think it's a good thing. Rather than 2 McMansions, would I rather have 2 McMansions or would I rather have 10 small apartments?
Excuse me, there is no room for 2 McMansions on that block.
It doesn't matter, we don't want them.
We don't want them anyhow, but don't talk about 2 when there's only room.
I'm gonna wrap up this. This has been very good.
We need to move on.
We're gonna get to another.
Stag walk.
No, they could look like anything.
One thing that's different than her example is the firehouse is public land.
It's owned by Princeton.
So whatever. Let's talk about Chambers Street.
Yeah. Number 7, top of the list.
Oh dear.
Where to go? 10 minutes. I think.
No. Why? Why does the Chambers Street garage need replacing?
The Chambers Street.
This one, the soldiers on this project.
No, it's uncontested. Uncontested.
Not uncontested. That's not appropriate. Right, that's not appropriate.
I think the important thing that when you're walking around in the shops in Palm Square,
there's no dispute about whether the
town
really has the right to
beautiful they walk through the archway, and all of a sudden the town
When the
stops.
school board found out they didn't own it, then very quietly the council, this is not the current council, the older council, sold it back to them. But anyway, leaving all of that aside, the point is that it's an asset owned by the people and it needs to be used for the people. And putting affordable housing is one idea. It's not the only idea. There was a neat idea.
Wouldn't there be rough down?
So the school board is in charge of an asset that needs to move forward, that needs to go somewhere. And I should also point out that my understanding is that the playing field is required for the accreditation of the high school. So it's not like there's a free piece of land just sitting there. That land has a use and it's needed for that use, unless it's replaced by another piece of land as a playing field to meet the requirements for the high school. So it's not just sitting there open. And so it's a complex situation, but the people need to understand that. And this notion of linking it together with Westminster is really harebrained because, for one thing, we want Westminster to remain as a choir school, and so that's the first priority, and there are still prospects for that. So it's a little early. The body isn't cold yet to start talking about tearing it down and merging it in with the Valley Road School property and bringing in a big developer to bring some kind of a big... that kind of thinking really gets us off track, and that's useless. And yet it's right here printed on the page. So,
no, it says should be included in auction for private development.
Right, that's my point. We're not in a position to be auctioning off anything at this point in time, and those two projects have nothing to do with each other. They're separate issues. They're not even in proximity to each other. So we're confusing ourselves by coming up with what I would consider a very harebrained idea. And we need to look at ideas that are good.
That the college is most likely not the same prisoners, that based on information they refuse to give out to the community yet, if it's
very likely that the college will be moved.
For the university golf.
And so, I mean, I don't know what we can do about it. Like, the students, the faculty, the town has tried to say this is an important institution. So I'm speaking to the conservatory because that's not going to go through. But that's my suggestion. We'd like to
from the campus proper. At any rate, New Learning Center. They've helped us in the last 6 months with the clearance of dead and dying trees, something they didn't have to do. They've done it mainly for safety purposes because it's not just we 425 members who use this facility, but as any of you who've been there, you know that students and in fact some townsfolk are walking across the course, hopefully understanding what's going on there, which is lethal balls flying at high speeds. But at any rate, they've helped us financially with that recent program, and they're going to continue to do that. So, and there are other ways in which they have indicated to us that they very much still value this as a venue for their, not only their golf team, but for their faculty, their other students who play there, and so forth. So these rumors that are flying around town about them buying Jasna Polana, or building a law school there, or building a medical school there, or selling it to Toll Brothers, we just, although they have the right to do that, and the licensing agreement, by the way, expires in 2036, not 2026, although there is a clause in it which gives them the right to evict us in 2026. At any rate, we believe that it's going to be a golf club for much more than 10 years. And that after that, we just have I didn't go to Princeton, I'm not on the alumni council there, but I can't believe they're going to just, as I say, sell it to Toll Brothers or somebody else for housing.
Sell property.
Yeah.
They never sell.
I mean, when I look at that property, you know, like the ad says, the word priceless comes to mind. Even if somebody in a high place should come in and want to develop a golf course, like one up the road. But at any rate, I don't think they'd sell it under any circumstances because they value its proximity to their main campus. 75 years from now, I think that they're going to continue to own it, and they're going to continue to maintain it as at least partly open space.
You have a comment?
Yeah, I had something that the university said to residents, because we actually formed a residential association because of our worst nightmare, this plan at the university showing bike paths and everything over the golf course. I think we have over 150 members now. The university, we have met with the university once, one big meeting and a couple of smaller meetings, and they have said to us a couple of things that are encouraging. One is they will do nothing with that property that would affect the rate of traffic on Springdale Road. So the worst nightmare, a residential college gets built across the street, can't happen without impacting the traffic on Springdale Road. They have said, secondly, that they have no plans, as of now anyway. Who knows what's going to happen in 20 years, but as of now, they have no plans to build anything on Springdale Road. So I'm not really speaking for the residents, but I think it's accurate to say the residents of the neighborhood in between the university, the university and the institute, University of Illinois. We like the neighborhood. We would hope that this property can be kept green in one way or the other. We think it's a great open space, and we also think it makes Princeton unique in
say that the real issue is making sure that Springdale Road is not a throughway.
Right.
And that was brought up. There are many West Princeton residents who want to open it up because Alexander Road is congested. I want to throw it out. Alan had the right idea. You need to go underground, and you need to go underground Faculty Road with, I don't care what it is, a dinky, a rail, or a mass transportation driverless train, but you need to start thinking about going underground, an underground faculty road, and now you need to go underground where the transit hub is today.
But as a board member of Springdale Golf Course on the membership committee, the best thing that Princeton Future can do is be very careful with what it advertises in the town topics about Springdale Golf Course. Like you would respect any organization that has a private licensing agreement or lease agreement. The last thing that you want to do is misconstrue the facts and damage or harm organizations. And I have gotten prospective members who have come to me and said, oh, the university is ceasing operations. I read this in Princeton Future. That's not helpful. And so to be able to be accurate is, it's in the town topics. Right. So I just be careful.
To destroy it for McMansions seems to be the height of bad planning.
So do good planning and stick with the plan.
Yeah.
The housing are so inefficient. I mean, in Germany and other places, they have buildings that have reduced the cost 90%. I mean, there's a great video here at the library about it. We're not talking much about that. We need to reduce energy use and planning the housing.
In any case, there should be an accent on community-centeredness when you think about the expansion.
Weigh in, what we would like is accurate. And so if we can't have those conversations because it's a hazard to the golf club, then we're asking for what Alan said.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry to interrupt this discussion, but I want to get us out of here by noon, as we promised. Thank you, everybody. What I'd like to do now is invite the 4 facilitators of each table, one at a time, to come to the podium and just give a 5-minute summary of the thoughts that were raised at each table. So David, if I might prevail upon you being the closest to start off, ladies and gentlemen, David Kinsey.
Good morning. Table 3 looked at the area, a slice of Princeton, starting at Nassau Street at the Bank of America site, and then heading north to the Montgomery border. We looked at about 10 sites along the way. The Chestnut Street, the Harrison Street Firehouse, the former, or the current First Aid Squad little building site on North Harrison Street, the shopping center itself, the northern edge of the shopping center along Terhune Street, lands that's been zoned for senior housing for a long time, the possibility of expanding Princeton Community Village on the top of Glen Drive, the hill, and then there's an 80-acre tract, so-called Landwind, on Harriton Road. Diverse and similar. Similar in lots of opportunities. In some places, environmental concerns are very important since we're on parts of the Princeton Ridge. I began by reading the statement that Princeton Future has put forward, and we ranged all over the place. And I think it's fair to say that we touched most of those topics, and there was broad agreement for those concerns, particularly the idea of increased density, more variety and choice of housing types. For example, making it allowable to take large houses, which are almost the standard size houses, and convert them to 2 houses, to 2 dwelling units. Same building envelope, same house, but make it possible for less expensive housing opportunities in the existing residential neighborhoods. In addition to doing things such as taking the Bank of America property and recognizing that there are other properties behind, nearby, and the fire station, and all that could be linked with rear parking, as well as perhaps some parking garages that that lot is already used by some nearby businesses that do not have adequate parking. So sharing parking, building more housing types, making it possible to build more housing types. And we also recognize that there are a lot of people of goodwill working toward keeping this and making this an even better community. And that's an important part of this planning process. That's the concluding note. Let's do good planning and then follow those good plans. Thank you.
I heard no opposition.
Professor Fernandez-Kelly.
Right, it's not very tall. I want to thank all who were sitting with me at table number 1. A magnificent group of people. Thank you for your contributions, and especially to Mary Clerman here, who kindly took notes, looking quite adorable. I really want to be very short because there is no scarcity of extraordinary ideas to improve quality of living in Princeton, and this is not new. It is a community formed by people who are smart, who are well educated, who have some money, and who are unusually good looking. And as a result, it is not for lack of good ideas that we continue to gather together in order to examine better ways to develop our community. Mary will actually educate us very briefly if I forget anything, but I think our conversation can actually be summed up in 2 simple points. The first one, it appears that we do not have a shared vision about what Princeton should be like in terms of diversity, in terms of objectives, and so on and so forth. And so one of the conclusions, I think, in our table is that we should seek better ways to generate some consensus about what we want Princeton to be like. And this is important because, as the wonderful Kirsten Toft reminded us, builders build what they are allowed to build. And so that questions of ordinance and government are very, very important in terms of generating that shared vision about what we want Princeton to be. The second and related point has to do with the relationship between government and community residents. I really want to impress on you that there was a lot of frustration in our table because, as Catherine told us, many people feel silent. They feel that they are not communicating with the planning board, with the city government, with the authorities in the education board, so that everybody seems to be doing something that is not generating a unified Princeton vision. And so we can talk about density and about the small footprint, carbon footprint, and about how to improve parks and create all kinds of improvements. But unless there is a somewhat shared vision, and unless there are better ways for the citizenry to communicate with government, we will continue to have meetings like this, which I very much look forward to. Is there something that I forgot that you believe is of key importance, Ms. Clerman?
You've covered really the essence of what's different. I think it's really important that every table have not a summary of everybody else's because we all agree on the basics, but the point of view I think is really critical.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, and now we'll hear from Jeffrey Goudon.
Well, if this exercise did anything, it certainly did at our table. Highlighted how interesting and how frustrating it can be when everyone gets together to plan what to do with somebody else's property. And there really isn't any consensus. We didn't have any consensus at our table, but some interesting things. People are concerned about the population. We met in groups like this 5 years ago, and people wanted more people in Princeton, and that wasn't necessarily the case at our table. People are concerned about traffic, but they're not necessarily confident that that traffic issue is going to be solved, even on the timetable that Dr. Kornhauser spoke of. They're less concerned about attracting millennials and more concerned about senior housing. And if we look around the room, I don't see a lot of millennials. So I think we, ran into similar frustrations with putting parking decks that have entrances and exits in residential communities. So some of the ideas that Jim talked about in terms of closing off driveways, I think they look great from a streetscape standpoint, but nobody wants that entrance or exit in front of their home. But there was some creativity that came out of looking at these sites, and I'll just highlight one of them. Struggling with the Westminster Choir College site, we now learned that there's a Westminster conservatory conservatory that's also there as an overlay, and would like to stay there even if the college leaves. So there was ideas about maybe having local performing arts groups also use that space, public-private, maybe some mixed use with some residential, some senior housing, bring senior housing a little bit closer to town. And then the idea that our school district, I guess, is still struggling with what to do with Valley Road. Well, the Westminster site is zoned educational, so maybe they could do some sort of a swap with school buildings for the town at the Westminster site, and then that would open up that space for commercial. So it just gives this idea when you put people in the community, sit them down at a table, and shoot some ideas around, some ideas that you haven't heard come to the forefront. So that's all I have. Thank you.
And now we'll hear from Catherine Kish.
Table 4 benefited from having Bob Hillier, Alan Kornhauser, and Jaina at the table, because we had people who really knew development, we had people who really knew the planning board, and we had people who really knew transportation. So needless to say, transportation was a key factor in our discussion, that neighborhoods should be transportation friendly, and many of them are not. We also had a lot of discussion about the value of mixed use, and the fact that we discussed everything from the Textile Institute property through the Springdale Golf Club, and looking at areas like the Butler Tract on Harrison. That's a big piece of land, and if it is going to be developed by the university into university housing, the question that Alan likes to raise is, where are they going to buy a quart of milk without getting into a car? And if you think about it, many of our neighborhoods are like that, and it raises the question of do people want to live in isolation even in this Amazon world, or do they want to be able to walk to some appropriate services if they can, and if it doesn't, if it's planned and therefore appropriate for the neighborhood? So that was an important part of many of the discussions of our pieces of property. The other big discussion was many of the pieces that we were discussing were university. And we had a conversation about what is the university doing? How can the needs of the community and the needs of the university coexist? What kinds of discussions are possible between the university and those representing the town? And we talked a little bit about the fact that we have become maybe more participative in recent times on a lot of different levels, on a lot of different issues, and that this is a very good way to help inform both our town leaders and our university leaders as to what the community needs are. Obviously, transportation is a key, mixed use, relations between university and town. And then we came to the Springdale Golf Course, and we had several representatives from the golf course at our table. Interestingly, it is a 240-acre property that was turned over to the university in 1909 for $10. So the relationship between the club and the university goes back a long way, and hopefully it will go forward a long way. That is the hope of the members of the club. Just an interesting side note, there are 425 members of the club currently, and they are aggressively looking to add to their membership. They are, although they see that it's possible that it won't remain a golf course forever, The question is, can it remain a golf course for a reasonable amount of time? And with the developments that the university is talking about, such as a very fancy $1 million training facility being built next to the club, it would seem that there are some long-term plans to keep it as, and the questions there are, should it be the same size? Should it be, you know, where is development possible? What are the good planning questions? And David reminded us at the end of that discussion that although there are many, many unknowns, this is a good time to be raising some good questions about what's out there in 2036, what's out there in 2046. What would a good future design be? And I think that was the theme of everything we talked about is, you know, this reinforcement of the notion that growth is coming, folks. Change is coming. More traffic is going to come unless we do something about it by planning in a very smart way ahead of time. So good discussion, and thank you, Table 4.
Thank you, Catherine and Patricia and Jeffrey and David for leading these conversations. So moving forward, Princeton Future, we're just putting up our new website, so you can go check this out. Still a few details to complete, but our presenters have offered to allow us to put their presentations this morning, including the full presentation Dr. Kornhauser wasn't able to go through. So we're going to put these PowerPoints on our new website, princetonfuture.org, so you can re-examine them. We're going to take the comments that we've heard today, pull them together over the summer, and start next fall looking at some specific sites, trying to develop some specific proposals that would showcase some of the ideas we've heard today. So I thank you all very much for coming today, and I wish you a wonderful Saturday afternoon.